Allô, attends, je vais te rajouter quelque chose. Allez, hop! I think I must have been about 6 years old when I first realized that something horrible had happened in my family. I remember I wanted to talk to my daddy, and I went to speak to him, and he explained to me, and he told me about what happened in his family, and also he told me that my mother had lost all her family in the war.
One of the reasons why I didn't like Sweden from the beginning was there were too many Nazis there. There was Karl Gerhardt, who was against the Nazis, and some of his shows were not even allowed to be shown because they were against the Nazis. So it was very much, for me, very much German in a way. And that has made a big impression on me when I came. Such a big impression that I could never feel at home there. I don't blame the Swedes, but when I came, it wasn't pleasant.
I felt Jewish. I didn't really know what it was, but I felt Jewish because of what had happened to my family, I think, very much. I started feeling different when I started school, because I had a different upbringing. I had a more German upbringing, and we had different habits, different food, different way of family life, and all this made me feel different to the children in my class. I was born and raised in Sweden. I lived for a long time in Australia and in Israel too, but now I live in France. After 30 years, my father left Sweden as well. Before this, we hadn't talked much about what happened during the war. So when Daddy's letter arrived, I got to learn for the first time how the family had managed to escape from the Nazis in Norway, and felt I would find the bits that had always been missing from my life.
I remember sitting in a car not far from the street where we lived in Hamburg. That terrible night, now known as the Crystal Night. I saw hordes of Nazis in civilian clothes breaking shop windows and vandalizing shops owned by Jews. Synagogues were set on fire, and tens of thousands of Jews were taken to concentration camps. It was the night of the 9th of November, 1938, when violence against Jews started to seriously escalate.
I received the story, good story, and I read it all, and I think you've read it all too, haven't you?
Yeah, I went through it. It was really interesting.
I think so too. And you know what? I would like to go to Germany. David came from Israel together with my father. The story Daddy told had made us want to journey back in time to look for places where our family once lived. Making that journey together with us was important to my father. Despite the heavy bombings Hamburg suffered during the Second World War, their house was still standing. It felt odd stepping through the door, and I could see in my mind's eye how they'd been suddenly forced to flee their home after the Crystal Night.
So this is where you were born, Daddy?
This is the house where I was born, and I moved from here when I was 5 years old. But I remember every single room and the garden also. We had 2 stories.
Here in Germany was the starting point of my father's escape. We travelled from Hamburg to Friedrichstadt, where our ancestors had lived.
This is the house, yes. That's where my family lived when we came from Spain and Amsterdam.
Your family came from Holland, you told me. What year was that?
That was, I think, 1502.
Hier im Haus, das war auch auf dem einen Foto, wohnte ein Ehepaar Heimann.
Heimann,
genau.
Das war mein Onkel und Tante.
Ja, die haben hier auch ein Geschäft gehabt.
Ja, aber das war...
I don't know how long my ancestors had lived in Spain before they were forced to flee during the Inquisition that started in the late 15th century, along with all the other Jews who had refused to join the Catholic Church. I find it incredible that they then went on to live in the same city and the same house for several hundred years. I've always felt a little rootless, as I've moved around a lot and lived in different countries. But walking around here and meeting people who had known our family awoke something very special inside me.
Ich heiße Kurt Levi. Meine Familie hat hier gewohnt.
Ja, wo?
Prinzenstraße 23. Also meine Großmutter hat noch gelebt, hier bis 1937, Clara Levi.
Nee, ich weiß noch, wie die Kristallnacht hier waren. Und wir hatten da immer so einen schäbigen Lehrer. Wir mussten hier hin und mussten zugucken, wie sie da die Dings, sag mal, wie heißt das, die Lampen da runtergerissen haben. Und oh, das hat uns so leid. Aber wir durften nichts sagen. Dann wurden wir eingesperrt.
Da ist jetzt ein kleiner Teeladen unten drin und eine Nähstube.
Genau, wir waren da.
Ja, genau.
Richtig, das Doppelgiebelhaus.
Das Haus mit dem Europa-Nostra.
When the mayor found out that we were looking for information about the Jews who'd lived in Friedrichstadt before the Second World War, he rang up a man who used to work in the town archive. And when he heard who we were, he invited us home. It was a very unexpected meeting for my father.
Also, ich kenne Sie schon aus den 20er Jahren her. Da war ich bei Ihnen in Hamburg in der Isestraße. Und da hat mir besonders gut Ihr Aufzug gefallen, der Lift, denn das war für mich völlig neu. Meine Mutter war bei ihren Eltern angestellt damals.
Ja, ich kann mich auf Ihren Namen besinnen.
Ja, Sie nannten sie damals...
Ich habe sie Tante Anna genannt.
Tante Anna?
Ja, das war sie, ja, genau. Ein schönes Mädchen.
For my part, this has grown into a very emotional visit into our past. I noticed that we were all touched by it. In this concealed place was a well-preserved Jewish cemetery.
Dankeschön. Ich muss aber sehen, wo die Gräber sind von meinen Verwandten. Sie wissen das? Fantastisch. Ah. Da war jemand da. Hier ruht mein Geliebter.
Das ist Ihr Urgroßvater?
Ja, das ist mein Urgroßvater. Das ist mein Urgroßvater. Da lege ich den Stein drauf. Sieh mal, wie viele Steine sind. Wie kommt es, dass dieser Friedhof so gut geblieben ist während der Hitlerzeit? Wissen Sie das?
Ja, bei dieser Reichspogromnacht da haben die Friedrichstädter SA-Männer die jüdischen Wohnungen und die Synagoge und die anderen Stätten nicht zerstört. Da mussten Leute von Husum kommen, die dieses Geschäft verrichtet haben. Und denen hat man nicht gesagt, dass hier der jüdische Friedhof ist. Und deswegen ist er hier erhalten geblieben.
Das ist interessant.
I was just 17 and my cousin Gert was 15 when we prepared a quick escape from Germany. Just 2 days after the Crystal Night, we managed to get ourselves on a boat from Hamburg to Norway. My father, like the other Jews, had had his business confiscated by the Germans 6 months earlier. He had to find a way out, and the answer was in Norway, where he and his brother had previously managed to get into. Despite the Norwegian border being closed, my brother, mother and sister all managed to get into Norway in different ways. In the spring of 1939 we moved to an apartment at 123 Kirkeveien in Oslo, and we could finally start living a family life again.